So today's talk is how to build a community of forgiveness, subtitle, death by filing cabinet, okay? So hopefully that'll work. You know, we had finished Growth Track just last week. We had 2 amazing weeks. We ate lots of pizza, spoke to a lot of new people, and one of the questions we got was, you know, why did you change your name? Because it's only been just over a year. We went to one church. Back in the 70s, we were known as Emsworth Fellowship. In the days when there was flares, who remembers the flares, fondue, and flag waving? Who remember those services? Great days. Then we became Emsworth Christian Fellowship, I think. Then eventually we switched to New Life Church, New Life Community Church, New Life Center, New Life Christian Church. I don't know how that happened, but we really felt a kind of a pull, a heart tug from the Holy Spirit just over a year ago to push towards a prophetic utterance that we are called to be one church. Who likes the old name, by the way? You can be honest. Yeah, there's a few. Who likes the new name? You have to say that, because who doesn't like either of the names? Yeah, you're a bit like, it's more about what's under the bonnet. That's kind of my view of church, right? Yeah. But we just thought this is going to be a prophetic moment for our church, okay? Because in a pluralistic society, when all truth is relative, we still have one God, don't we? The Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all. It reveals our heart for mission, okay? That Jesus left the 99 to pursue the one. Ultimately, in the end, we still care about one person each week making a commitment to Christ, one family at a time. Wasn't it great to see Phil last week step out in faith and make a commitment to Christ? Should we honor him for... Let's give it a bit more than that. We can really... Hope I'm not embarrassing you. But it's about one person and the influence of one person make a decision to follow Jesus has an incredible level of ripple through family and society, doesn't it? It points us towards our unity. We're one people. God commands a blessing where people become one. Isn't that right? It's also a longing we have in us for renewal and for revival and for reformation. The disciples were in one place, in one accord, and the Holy Spirit came in and crashed amongst them. But the main reason, the verse that we really pushed towards was actually Jesus' dream for the church. It was his prayer for you and me that we become one. A new command, he said, I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. And he doesn't stop there in John 17. He carries on. Jesus starts praying for you. He starts praying for me, that we may be one as he is one with his Father. In them, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. Schaeffer called this the last great apologetic, okay? The ultimate proof that Jesus is ultimate reality. He is truth. Without true Christian loving one another, he says, Christ says that the world cannot be expected to listen even when we give proper answers. Let us be careful indeed and spend time, a lifetime even, studying to give honest answers. But after we have done our best to communicate to the lost world, still we must never forget that the final apologetic which Jesus gives, the observable love of true Christians' love for true Christians. intellectual objections to the faith should be addressed. However, the truth of the gospel must be declared, defended, and practiced such that the unbelieving world can't help but take note. It should be apparent, something inexplicable on natural grounds is at work. That's Christian love. A divided world needs a united church, doesn't it? You know, the last few years, it's been so divided, hasn't it? In the last few short years of our tenure, now we've had the Brexit. Who voted to stay? Who voted to leave? No hands. We don't talk about religion or politics, do we, in church? Divided, political polarization away from the center, race riots, statues pulled down, Winston Churchill boxed up in front of Parliament. The pandemic brought punch-ups as people argued about face masks and vaccines. Conspiracy theories grew. A lot of Christians just had a mild flu, while the rest of the world had a global pandemic. Anyone? Was that too close to the bone, maybe? Despite all that, we have grown in our love for one another. Say to the person next to you, despite all that, I still love you. A little bit, just a small bit. I think I love you. And maybe that was a proposal for one of you for marriage, and great, I hope that worked. Here's the thing, church. It's easy, it should be on the acetate, for us to build sanctuaries of separation, not sanctuaries of love and forgiveness. We all receive hurts. We all give hurts. Hurting is natural, but forgiveness is supernatural. And often in life, we get hurt by people we love the most, trust the most, and have helped the most. Isn't that right? So how can we, as a community of love, we spoke about that last week, build a community of forgiveness, an exemplary community of forgiveness? Because I don't think, and I don't use the word exemplary because we're perfect, but the world needs to see what it is to love one another and to unite. Most things in life are not taught, they're caught, aren't they? They have a visual understanding of what it is to love and to forgive. I was always quite, got to be honest, poor at maths. Anyone like me? Very poor at maths. And my parents spent an absolute fortune trying to get me in extra special maths lessons with the local kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of maths Jedi. But the truth is, I didn't really like it. And even when it came to my exam, I just used to go on vacations and not turn up to school and do all that kind of stuff. And don't do that, young people. That wasn't a good example for me to set. Honey, I'm looking at you right now. But some of you are amazing at maths. I was at youth a couple of weeks ago on a Friday, and I was I'm doing A-level maths, I'm doing higher maths, and I'm doing a degree in maths. And I was just like, I felt so embarrassed, so intimidated. I was like, okay, I was in maths. And even when I used to go shopping with Vivi, I hated counting, so I always used to round everything up. So I'd be in the co-op, it'd be like, £2.88. And I would just give them £3 all the time. And she said, why do you keep giving our money away all the time? And it's because I just didn't want to look like a bit of a fool, and I'd be counting on my fingers and on my toes. And have you got any marbles I could start using to count? I'm terrible at maths. But one area that we are all brilliant at math is the area that we know how to count people's mistakes against us, don't we? We know how to count score. Back in 1986, I remember you called me Larry the Lemon. The sun was shining. We remember every detail. There was a slight breeze on my face. You were wearing a red jumper, blue jeans, blue socks, white shirt, an embroidery on your left side of your white shirt, golden cufflinks. I remember that day. You had the cufflinks. And we stood outside of the co-op, which then became a pet shop, which then became a pub, which now is a coffee shop. And I just remember you looked at me and you sneered at me. We remember every single detail. Time, place, date, win prediction, star alignment. We remember those moments. And there's this moment, isn't there, when Peter asked Jesus, and we're going to read just 2 or 3 verses, and then we're going to conclude with the parable. He says, he's asking really, what are the boundaries when it comes to forgiveness? And it's in Matthew 18, and it's not on the screen. It says, then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother, my sister, my spouse, a parent, an ex, who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Peter was a bit of a scallywag, wasn't he? He was a ruffian, a bit hot-tempered, no problem rinsing people verbally. He was that kind of character. And I got this kind of sneaky feeling that something was going on in the background. Maybe it was one of the disciples. Maybe it was a fishing deal that went wrong. Maybe he was one of the disciples that was married. Maybe it was a marriage issue. And Jesus just blows it away, doesn't he? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. That's 490 times a day, every few minutes, if you do your maths correctly. Jesus was saying, forgiveness is not about keeping score, it's about losing count. Forgiveness is not about an event in your life, it's the process for your life. It's not a happening, it's a way of life. Jesus was saying, if you want to exponentially grow in your life, in your ministry, you've got to exponentially forgive. I want to introduce to the young people one of last century's computer systems. An early pioneer of the memory stick, I think we'll call it. It's kind of, we have this way, don't we, of holding files against people. Do you remember these? Still a couple somewhere up in our loft. We used to have few rooms would be full of these things, wouldn't they? You couldn't get in your office, you'd have to walk around them. And we'd have these filing cabinets. In the old days, we would go to the library, a place that had books with like real pages, and we would take a photocopy on a Xerox machine, and then we would go back to one of these computers, and we would file information away. And I think sometimes spiritually, we kind of have files on people, don't we? We have files on people. Here's some I found from earlier. Someone must have prepared them for me. We have files on family, on friends, on nation, on government. Got a file here on my dad because he never went to my football games. Jeremy's got a file on me because I went to his football games and embarrassed him in front of the referee all the time because I took everything personally. Got a file on Mum. Who remembers the 70s and 80s before the naughty step? Anyone? The slipper days. Anyone remember those days? Yeah, I can't say any more in case this goes online to a policeman, but Mum, if you're watching online, you got a file. You got a file. Friends. Okay, someone in 1981 stole your girlfriend. I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing they stole your girlfriend. Have you seen her recently on Facebook? Like, she has not aged well. Time was not kind. Like, you should be happy with the girlfriend you got, the wife you've got. She looks crazy on Facebook. You didn't get invited to the party. Is it any of those ones where suddenly you see this party's happened and your invite, it got lost in the post. So you got a file on them, right? File for friends. File for Vivi. This came out of a whole separate drawer. 25 years of the old, not ball and chain. You can't say that. Every year, another file, another file, another file, another file. But one year, she ganged up on me with all of her 2 sisters. I felt that was painful. Another year, she locked me out of the house at 3 in the morning because I was interceding through the night with my friends. got invited out by friends to go to places you shouldn't go. So I had to sleep in my VW, the old VW Polos, not the new VW Polos, till about 4 in the morning. Aren't you glad that there was, kind of cameras in those days on the phones and stuff? Because if people would have heard that, that would have been the end of my ministry. But anyway, and other things, like she turned me down a few times. Like I put Barry White on, you know what I'm saying? She said she had a headache quite a lot. That went after year after year after year, headaches happening all the time. Churches, you've got files on churches, podcasters that you've never even met. We got files on school teachers, not in this church because they're all wonderful. We got files on our boss because he gave us the hairdryer treatment and we couldn't handle it. We've even got files on ourselves, haven't we? Files on ourselves, sometimes a level of just real self-hatred because we've made some mistakes in our lives. And as they say in ministry, the biggest threat to your ministry is the person who looks back at you in the mirror every morning. And that's true, isn't it? But we have these files. But the trouble is when we carry all these files around with us, our hands are just not free to grasp what God has for us in this moment. And some of us are just hiding. You can tell whether a person's got unforgiveness journey because they're either hiding behind their filing cabinet like this. Others are just holding on and they're literally trying to come into worship. Like, God, they really are heavy. I can't move it on my own. I thought I'd walk across the stage with it. That's not going to work. But literally, people are holding on and they're rocking up to worship and they're trying to get God to speak to their lives, but they cannot receive a thing because they are holding on to areas of unforgiveness. When we keep score on people, we just don't have a light spirit, do we? Where we can just receive what God's got for us in our today. Our hands are just not free to receive what God wants to do in our today, in our moment. It says in Lamentation, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end because they are new every morning. And because the Spirit wants to speak to you in a new way every morning, if you're holding on to past files, you're just not ready to receive what he wants to do in your life. When we keep score on people, we always enter into the comparison trap, don't we? We're either looking down our nose of the people and the wrong that people have done towards us, and we essentially enter into judgment on them, condemnation and guilt. Or if they are doing better than us in life, we project guilt and shame onto ourselves because we're captured and connected in unforgiveness towards them. Why is forgiveness important? Well, Catherine Ponder says, when you hold resentment towards another, you are bound to that person of condition by an emotional link that is stronger than still. Forgiveness is the only way to dissolve that link and get free. Remember what Jesus said. This is the same chapter actually in Matthew 18. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. What are you binding your spirit to? There's some big spiritual consequences for being and holding unforgiveness towards people. Physically, this is what I really believe. People will get healed through this service. And as you let go, God is going to bring restoration to your life. There's an enormous physical burden to being hurt and disappointed, says Karen Swartz, okay? Chronic anger puts you in fight or flight mode. It's like the filing cabinet, isn't it? We're hiding or we want to hold the whole filing cabinet of people in anger, which results in numerous changes to your heart rate, blood pressure, immune responses. Those changes then increase the risk of depression, heart disease, diabetes, among other conditions. Forgiveness, however, calms stress levels, leading to improved health. Isn't that amazing? Forgiveness is not about keeping score. It's about losing count. Why did Jesus say, love your enemies? If someone wants your shirt, give them a tunic as well. That basically made them naked because they didn't have underwear like we have today. Go the extra mile for people. Like that was one of the laws that the Jews absolutely hated, didn't they? Because it was like, any Roman soldier could say, look, carry my burden for 1 mile. And Jesus is like, go the extra mile. They would have hated that. But what was Jesus saying? He was asking us to reframe the picture. Most of these kids, these Roman soldiers, were from Syria. They were children. And they were conscripts into the army. And Jesus was saying, show them some compassion. Go the extra mile with these lads that have been pulled out of their homes as well. Bless those who curse you. You can't hold score. You can't fill up filing cabinets when you are blessing people and grateful for people. If I'm blessing Sarah right down the front saying, God bless you, Sarah. He's got a great purpose for your life. I'm grateful for your life. I can't keep score against her, can I? They just clash. They don't go together. Jesus was saying, don't let evil that's outside of you become evil that goes on the inside of you. How do I know if I have unforgiveness? And this may sound it's very easy really, and this may sound a bit technical. Usually it's because we're hiding behind the filing cabinet. We're holding on to it. But the road to unforgiveness is this: transgression, perception, emotion, rumination, and unforgiveness. Transgression, something is done outside of your control. Perception, we tell a story about that person and ourselves. Emotion, we feel abandoned, isolated, angry, rejected. We have fear that comes up, but then that leads to something called rumination. It's called the bad boy of emotional health. I tell the story, what happened to me, over and over again. I am the victim, okay? Then I take on a self-righteousness and look down on the victim. A sense of superiority overtakes me. So not only am I the victim, possibly, and I'm also the self-righteous one. And you're caught in this loop and unable to come out of it. Then rumination leads to the birthing of unforgiveness, which is I want to hold on to my right to hurt this person. Question: have you ever been lost in your thoughts? Have you ever started to tell yourself a story? I'm the victim, they are the villain. You go into fight or flight mode. Your muscles tense up. You clench your fists. Your blood pressure rises. Your pulse speeds up. You start speaking to yourself. You start thinking of past hurt and trauma and abandonment and pain and estrangement. Then you realize you're just caught up in traffic. The power of unforgiveness, that no one needs to even be in the room with you to go down a loop of self-destruction. I remember I was in traffic recently. The A27, they're building all these new houses. And we got a school run around 7:30 to 8 in the morning. And it's packed, isn't it? And this guy, a few cars in front of me, just stopped the car and just got out. He's an older guy, and then everyone's thinking, what is he doing? They start saying some special words and honking their horn, pushing their fists into the air. And the old man, he gets out, walks across the verge, opens the door to his house. His wife comes out, and she's an old lady who's disabled. He puts her back in the car and drives off. What happened? The story we told ourselves had to change in that moment, didn't it? From a point of this selfish, ignorant, to man, what a husband, what compassion, what love. It's all about the stories that we tell ourselves. How can we walk in forgiveness? Well, it's a process. And we need to be careful that we don't make quick, fast judgments on happenings and people. So just quickly, unforgiveness is not forgetting, by the way. Okay, some people say time heals all things. That's not true if you have unforgiveness, because unforgiveness festers unless you foster forgiveness. That's good, isn't it? Forgiveness is not appeasement, okay? People still do wrong. Wrong is wrong. Winston Churchill said, an appeaser is someone who feeds a crocodile hoping it will eat them last. That's good, isn't it? Forgiveness is not vengeance. Vengeance is to carry ill will towards the person who hurt you. Justice, on the other hand, is a passionate desire for that right to be done, for right to be done. Forgiveness is replacing ill will with goodwill towards the person who has hurt me. That's difficult, isn't it? So what's the road to recovery? Well, I've been looking at some research by a guy called Everett Worthington, and he uses an acrostic, okay, which is called REACH, out for forgiveness, REACH. And the first thing he says we need to do is we've got to recall the hurt. What was the specific thing that was done to me or against me? Thoughts brought into the light, remember, have no power over you, do they? John Ortberg says, instead of ruminating, which leads to reinforcing my own sense of victimhood, my superiority by dehumanizing the other, take a neutral, objective standpoint. I am no longer captive to the old story. And remember, these are not linear. They can't even align. There's numbers on them. But you have to go backwards and forward through these over the process of time. Number 2 is empathize with the other person. It doesn't mean what happened is right. It just means you start to look at the other person with a sense of godly compassion. They are human. They were born into sin as well, yet they image God. Alexander Solzhenitsyn says, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart. Show compassion. Got to pray, got to knock, we've got to ask, we've got to lean in for that compassion. Number 3 is give an altruistic gift of forgiveness. In other words, you're giving them a gift of grace. You may not deserve this, but I give you this gift. I forgive you. I let you go. You owe me nothing, and I will pray towards your flourishing. That's difficult, isn't it? Think and reflect about all the people in your life that have forgiven you. Think about your parents. Think about your friends that have forgiven you, the people around you that put up with your blind spots that you can't see. Think about how they forgive you constantly, how your friends have forgiven you. Then we have to commit to the forgiveness, because it's natural to doubt, isn't it? You know, if you burn your hands on an oven, okay, even when they heal up, when you walk past that oven, you might get a bit of goose pimples or fear will come back from before, and that's totally natural. But we can be in a place where we say, you know, on the 2nd of March, 2024, last week I said 2014, mixed it up by a decade or two, but 2024, I'm going to choose to forgive that person. You don't have to project it to the world, but you can write it down. I'm starting the work of forgiveness. Then we've got to hold on to the commitment we have made. I'm no longer a slave to victimhood or self-righteousness. I'm a child of God. I'm a new creation. Okay? Sometimes in our relationships, they can't be reformed as we hope they would be formed again. I've learned one thing, even in leadership and growing church and building new things, that some people are just never going to really get you, okay? They're never going to be on team with you. And things will never go sometimes in our relationships to the way they used to be. And I love what Romans 12 says. He says this, doesn't he? If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Our goal, your goal, as a forgiving community as we grow in this, is to do the work. As much as we can to live at peace with those around us. But then we've got to be in peace with the fact that some people will never be in peace with us, and that's okay. But forgiveness is not about them. It's about our health, our restoration, our emotions, God's shalom for us. Lastly, we can reflect redemptively. And I wasn't even sure about putting this one in because I was like, that sounds like good preacher's talk. Reflect redemptively. But when you're in the pain, when you're in the trench, when the tragedy's happening, when you're walking through the pain, you don't go, you know what, God is going to use this for my good one day. Do you? But it is true that some of the worst things that happen to us in life, if we let God into our situation, if we commit to the process and the work He will use for His glory and our betterment, we will be able to say, like Joseph, after 13 years in slavery and rejection and having false accusation put his way, as for you, brother, mother, ex-partner, whoever that person is, when you say as for you, maybe it's a picture of Darth Vader, maybe it's a picture of someone in your family. As for you, one day you'll be able to say this, what you meant for evil against me, God meant it for good, to bring about the saving of many lives. We can speak like Joseph in faith, and we can speak like Moses. Remember, he says to the Israelites, that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from with His mighty hand by an outstretched arm. We can say the words of Moses. We all receive hurts. We all give hurts. Hurting is natural, but forgiveness is supernatural. Forgiveness is not about keeping score, it's about losing count. Forgiveness is about walking in physical and emotional wholeness. That's God's plan for your life. Lastly, forgiveness is about your eternal state. Now, I just want to finish with the parable that Jesus told after Peter said to him, 7 times? No, and Jesus is like, no. 70 times 7. You've got to commit to the process. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him, since he was not able to pay. In other words, it was impossible for him to pay. The master ordered that he and his wife and his children, all that he had, be sold to repay the debt. As his servant fell on his knees before him, be patient with me, he begged. I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him and cancelled the debt and let him go. The Father looks on you through the lens of his Son's sacrifice on the cross. He looks at you through the blood that bought your freedom, because your debt of sin has been completely cancelled. The master is reflecting on who Jesus is. But then the servant, this same servant, went out and he found one of his fellow servants who owed him just 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servants fell onto his knees and begged, be patient with me and I will pay you back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged, incensed, and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I have cancelled all your debt because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his masters handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all he owed. Now Jesus says this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. It's a powerful statement, isn't it? It is unforgivable to be unforgiving spiritually. In Matthew 6, Jesus says, forgive people's sins so that your Father can forgive your sin. He's actually teaching them to pray. Make sure you forgive people's sins. To not forgive, church, is to pronounce a death sentence over your spiritual walk with God. That's powerful, isn't it? It's serious, isn't it? You know, we come to church and we sing songs and grab a coffee, do life with one another. It's beautiful. But this is about your eternity, your walk with God. As we take communion, let's reflect on how Jesus has brought restoration and forgiveness into our own hearts and minds. But before you take it, make sure you forgive. If maybe there's an element in your life and you're holding on, you're still here at the filing cabinet, holding on, full of files stacked up against people. If that person comes to your mind, release them. Say, I forgive you. I forgive you. And thank Jesus for what he's done. Do you just want to spend a bit of time praying with one another? The band are going to come up and lead us in worship. Let's just stay where we are.